Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you're having a good day wherever you are. And if you're having not as great a day, I hope I'm here to help you out. I'm really excited today because my guest on the show today is Allister lead singer and guitarist Tim Rogner. And you'll hear me talk a little bit about it to Tim. This is as I tried to contain my need to fanboy out. But Allister are one of my favorite bands. They were one of the first bands I was listening to when I first started getting into pop punk in the early 2000s. And I had their album Last Stop Suburbia, and it was out on Drive-Thru Records, and a very seminal label for pop punk at the time. And I reached out to him because they have a new record coming out, and he said he wanted to talk to me. So I was thrilled. So he tells me some incredible tour stories, especially of their big fan base and their touring experience in Japan. And there's some really good guitar talk. And it was just a really great chat because if you're into punk or pop punk, I think you'll probably understand the sort of communal powers of the scene and that style of music. And Tim certainly spoke to that, and it was really great to hear some of his stories from touring in Japan as well, because that's of interest to me. So it was really great to sit and talk with him. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys enjoy the show and want to help me out, you can leave me a review on iTunes, or you can add me to your favorites playlist on Stitcher. Those are things that help boost the visibility of the show. And if you enjoyed this enough to tell a friend, I'd be eternally grateful for that. So thank you guys very much for listening. And let's go to my chat with Tim Rogner of Allister. Hey, good to talk to you. I really appreciate you doing this, man. This is a big deal for me. Thank you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. No problem. Thanks for getting in touch. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. I was kind of surprised when you got back to me, because like when I think of like people and artists that have like had a significant impact on my life and in my like development as a person, Allister is like on that list.
That's so rad, man. It's really, seriously, like, it's really flattering. You know, like people say that to us every once in a while, and it's such an awesome feeling, because I remember what that was like when I was a kid. You know, like there's bands that I looked up to when I was 14, 15, 16, bands that I still look up to, that, you know, they aren't huge bands, but the times that I've gotten a chance to meet them, and some of them I haven't even had a chance to meet them, and I think, man, if I did right now, if I had a chance to talk, what would I say? Like, these people were such a huge influence on me. So that's really cool, man. I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm just out of curiosity, what would one of those bands be?
Well, Face to Face is probably one of my favorite bands. And it's actually kind of a funny story, because about 2 years ago, so we recorded a record back in 2005 called Before the Blackout. And it was produced by this guy, Dennis Hill. He was in a band called Lefty, and we were big Lefty fans. And so, you know, we got to know Dennis. Like, he's really, really cool. He did a great job producing the record. Well, come to find out, you know, 10 years later, he actually plays in Face to Face now.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't know that until the last time that I went to go see them. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet the rest of the guys in the band. But I'm going to go see him again in a couple of weeks. They're coming through Chicago. So I'll get to see Dennis again. And I kind of hope I get a chance to meet some of the other guys in the band, because they're a huge, huge influence on me. And I just think it would be like super cool.
I understand that 100%, because, and I think I told you a little bit about this over Twitter. So far, the only time that I've seen Allister live, you guys were at the Record Theater in Towson, Maryland, in the Baltimore suburbs, not the city, but like the suburbs of Baltimore County, and you were on tour with Mest.
Okay,
And
yeah, I think I remember that.
I was it was a great show. It was my sophomore year of college, and I had just like started going to like concerts, like at clubs, as opposed to like driving to DC to go to like big arena shows. And I
Right.
was just singing every single word, shouting out every single line, literally to every song. And I was a good foot taller than everyone else in the crowd.
That's awesome.
And and Scott points me out and says, "Oh, it's great when the tallest guy in the crowd knows all your lyrics. So if I ever forget something, I can just go to him."
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so just like moments like that, and I feel for me at least, moments like those, that kind of like really close connection with the of artist and fan happens more in the punk community than I think it does other genres, at least for me. And that's what
Yeah,
I've always loved about it.
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I kind of feel the same way, and that's kind of, that's kind of been part of Allister's mantra, I think, since the very beginning, is that, we grew up in that scene, and we try really hard not to kind of forget things like that, because we're all kind of in this together, and there's a communal love for the music and just meeting new people and getting to know people and experiencing new things, and music is kind of a part of that. Um, and I think it's one of those things that brings people together. And so we try really hard to kind of keep that connection with fans and with people that like our band.
That's beautiful, man. I love hearing people say that. I'm so curious about the scene that Alistair kind of came up in and where you're from, because you're from Chicago originally.
Yeah. Yep. Born and raised.
And
Well, I should clarify. So, because people from Chicago get mad if I say that I'm from Chicago. I'm technically from the suburbs of Chicago, so I grew up as a suburbanite. So I didn't actually grow up in Chicago proper.
mhm.
But if I say Elk Grove Village, nobody really knows where that is. So we just say Chicago to keep it simple. But technically, I grew up in the suburbs.
I know I can relate. I grew up about an hour south of Baltimore, in a town called St. Leonard, Maryland, which has a population of 800. So
Okay.
so to me, the suburbs would have been like an upgrade, because I was like, I've been thinking back on it now more, but I was literally like a couple steps away from being, I was like the suburbs version of being a survivalist. Like I was
Right.
pretty close to being off the grid, and how I
Are you
actually
are your families like farmers?
no, my mom was an elementary school teacher for over 30 years, and my dad just retired a couple years ago. He was the a shift operator at a nuclear power plant. So I grew up 20
Okay.
minutes. I grew up 20 minutes from a nuclear power plant, which if I ever need to explain my personality is what I tell people. And like how I discovered Allister was, uh, in Kmart actually, and I was looking through the CDs, and I picked up Last Stop Suburbia, and I was like, oh, that's a cool cover. And then I looked and saw that bright yellow arrow, and I was like, oh, Drive-Thru, I'll probably like this.
Nice.
So
That's hilarious. I actually had no idea that Kmart even sold our record.
no, you definitely did. I'm not sure exactly what distribution Drive-Thru had early on, but they had you in the big box stores at least when I was in high school.
Cool. Yeah, even
S-
better.
Yeah. So, what was your home life like growing up? When you say suburbanite, given that I'm kind of from that, I have a certain idea of what that was like. What was your house like growing up?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty typical, just middle class. Like you, my mom was an elementary school teacher growing up my whole life.
Oh wow.
My dad was a police officer, so it was a fairly strict household, I guess. My
Hmm.
parents made me work for everything, which I appreciate now. They didn't let us slack off at all. It was typical middle class Chicago suburban, family. I got two brothers, both younger than me. One of them plays in a band called August Premier, one of my favorite bands of all time. And the other one actually lives out in Las Vegas.
Oh really?
Um, yeah, so I mean, I don't think there was anything terribly out of the ordinary with the way that I grew up. It was fairly common, I think.
Hmm. And there's definitely something to that, I think, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not. I've talked about this with other people, that there's this kind of lack of stimulus, I think, that comes from a suburban upbringing that I think fosters having an imagination and a creative spirit. And because I was thinking recently, none of my favorite pop punk bands specifically come from major cities. It's all from the suburbs. So, do you feel like there's any connection to that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be something to that for sure. I mean, I think I say, especially like in my generation, you know, I graduated from high school in '96.
Hmm.
So what does that make me? Gen X, I think that made us kind of Gen X.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think so.
yeah, and I think we kind of came up in sort of like the late '80s, early '90s was like my childhood, and then in kind of obviously mid '90s too. I suppose there was. I don't know if this was unique to where I grew up. I'm sure it's probably the same in just about every suburban, suburbs of any major city. But I suppose there was a little bit of disillusionment with everything that was going on in the suburbs, and there was a creative outlet. I think that we were, at least me and the guys in the band, were kind of looking for at the time. And I'll never forget, like, the first time I saw a punk rock band. I was probably 15, I think. A friend of mine took me to this place called the Fireside Bowl, which is a really, really famous underground punk rock venue in Chicago.
Yes.
And he's like, "Hey, you got to come check this place out. Like, there's these bands that play there. It's really cool." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Like, I was into music. Like, I've loved music my whole life. And I was like, "Okay, it's cool. I'll go check it out." And we went, and there was two bands playing. There was one band called Rhythm Collision and another band called the Bull Wheels. And from the opening note of the first band, I was absolutely blown away. Like, I had never, ever seen anything like that before in my life. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I, like, to this day, I remember thinking, that's exactly what I want to be doing. This is exactly where I fit in and what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Like, it was almost, it kind of sounds really silly, but you know how some people believe in, like, love at first sight?
Sure.
And they meet that one person and, shit just feels right and it just makes sense. That's how I felt that night when I saw that show. And, it's kind of been the same ever since.
Yeah, I understand that completely. The first punk rock song I ever heard made me made me feel that feeling you were just describing was um, Dumpweed off of Enema of the State by Blink.
Okay.
Just the first time hearing that big open. I think that was the first time I ever heard a big booming open E5,
Right.
and I was just like, oh, because I'd never heard like power chords or palm muting before, or like noodly like little arpeggios like on What's My Age Again. That's exactly what I was like. I was like, oh, okay. It was like
Right.
it was like one of those like come to Jesus kind of moments. I was like,
Yeah, yeah. And
that.
it's so cool how, like, it just makes sense. Like, you can't really describe it, you can't really explain it, but it's just like, yes, I understand this completely.
Yeah, I have one kind of nerdy question to ask about the Fireside Bowl because I've never been there before, but
Yeah.
I kn- I know it's a very important part of the Allister lore, and the new music video for Somewhere on Fullerton's at the Fireside Bowl, right?
Correct. Yeah, yeah, we shot that there.
So when bands would play there, would they always set up the way you are in the video in the bar area while the bowling still went on, or was that room configured differently when you were younger?
No, so the entire place is still configured exactly the same. Um,
I love that.
the bar was actually just a bar. Like, bands wouldn't play in there. The stage that they had, it was like a 1 foot stage, but it was actually off to the left of the lane, like at the far left of the lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't really see it in the video. I think maybe there's like one shot that kind of just pans through as like I think there's one shot where the camera kind of follows us out of the bar into like the bowling lanes, like into the lane area.
Mm-hmm.
If you look kind of straight ahead towards the very far end of the lane, that's where the stage used to be set up. Um, in fact, back then, they never even used to let anybody on the lanes themselves. They used to kind of like broke those off.
Right.
So you could only stand kind of like in the, the tiled communal area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we would just watch bands. And I mean, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. Like that place would fill up when bigger bands were coming, like either from Chicago or from out of town. Like that place would fill up, and it would just be the coolest place in the world.
That sounds amazing. I'm thinking back to the local shows I went to in high school with like the 4 local bands, but it was just it was something to do, and they would put on shows at the volunteer firehouse and
Yeah,
like the like gated community rec center, and
yeah. So like BFW halls and stuff like that.
oh, 100%, and like
Yeah,
everyone you knew from school would show up, and everyone would just be like having a great time.
yeah.
That kind of is where the bug stuck for me, bit me early also. So rhythm, I'm gonna listen back to this and be like, okay, I gotta find this band, I gotta find that band. So punk rock grabs you when you're like 15 or 16, and do you know the members that become Allister at this point? How soon do you form a band after this moment?
So yeah, so it's really interesting. So the genesis of the band started right around that time when we were like 16. So I knew John, our old guitar player. He's no longer in the band, but he was one of the original members.
John Hamada?
Yeah, John Hamada. And him and I kind of grew up together. We weren't necessarily friends, but we went to the same junior high. We went to the same high school. We were kind of in the same circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
Him and I never actually hung out together per se, but we knew of each other and we were friendly with each other. Well, I want to say it was our junior year, maybe in high school, or sophomore or junior year. They were having like a variety show right in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and him and I decided to kind of put a band together to play at this variety show. And at the time, he had just kind of started learning how to play guitar, and I had played drums. And we knew a couple of other guys who played guitar, and then we got this girl who was a friend of ours to be the singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did like a cover of a Cranberries tune or something for this variety show, right?
Yeah.
And because it just gave us something to do. We just wanted to play music. At that point, we weren't really sure what it was that we really wanted to do. We just knew that we liked to play, and so we kind of we had that band for like a couple of months, and then we started to play and practice a little bit more with that same group of people, but nobody really wanted to play the kind of music that John and I wanted to play, which was punk rock, right?
Right.
And so John and I decided, you know what, let's just go off and do our own thing. And so we ended up graduating high school, and we went to college. He went to the University of Illinois. I went to Eastern Illinois. And John met Eric the first day of school and
Mm-hmm.
started talking to him. And I'll never forget, like, he calls me up like 2 days later, and he's like, hey, I met this guy. He's like really cool. He plays bass. He's like, I think you should just join the band. I think we should continue this band, and we should just be a 3-piece. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And so that's essentially how Allister formed. Fun fact, I don't know if you know this or not, but one of the working names for our band was Fall Out Boy.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So we didn't have like a real name for the band, and we weren't really sure exactly what we wanted to call it.
Uh-huh.
But one of the working titles for about 2 or 3 months was Fall Out Boy, and it never seemed to stick. Nobody really liked it, and we're like, finally we came up with Allister. We're like, okay, that's a little bit better name. In retrospect, I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, but it is what it is, and here we are.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great. That is maybe one of the craziest things I've ever heard. That's almost be like That would almost be like if if my old band was called like Huey Lewis in the News, and be like, oh,
Yeah, right.
oh,
Yeah, we still laugh about it to this day. It's pretty funny.
that's hysterical to me. So Allister kind of forms, and I'm guessing if I'm not sure how far away your colleges were, but uh, are you playing together a lot and doing gigs right away, or is that kind of a slower process?
Yeah, we try to play as much as we can, so it worked out pretty nicely because um, our schools were about 45 minutes apart from each other, and
Mm-hmm.
so we would generally get a chance to play and practice probably like, I don't know, 2 times a month. And John and I had a bunch of songs already written, and it was just kind of a matter of just practicing them and playing them and sort of fine tuning, songs that you can when you're 17, 18 years old.
Sure, yeah.
Um, and so that's really kind of what we did, and we tried to play as much as we can, or as much as we could, which we did. We ended up, playing anywhere you could possibly imagine. We played in classrooms on campus. We played in dining halls on campus. We played in basements at house parties,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere and everywhere. And then we finally, that next winter, we were able to go into the studio and record a 7-inch because we had about 5 songs that we wanted to record. And that was the first time any of us had ever recorded like in a real studio. So we
Yeah.
went in and we did it, and that became You Can't Do That on Vinyl, which was the first release. And we sent that to Drive-Thru. We've kind of been sending out demo tapes and stuff to some labels that we had just kind of heard of. And we sent that to Drive-Thru, and they were one of the only labels that really liked it. And they're like, hey, we want to work with you guys. We really like these songs. We think they're cool. And we're like, all right. Things just kind of went from there. And then a year and a half later, we were in Los Angeles recording a full-length record. It was really, really bizarre, actually.
That's that is so cool, man. And how did you come to be aware of Drive-Thru Records? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Alistair was like, you were one of the earlier signings for Drive-Thru, like when they were first beginning.
Yeah, I want to say like that EP that You Can't Do That on Vinyl. That 7-inch was like it was like their 10th or 11th release or something, or ninth, 7th, 8th, ninth. I don't know, I forget exactly what it was. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't really know how we got in contact with Drive-Thru. John was kind of the PR person, and he was kind of like
Right.
the liaison. He did a lot of that stuff, talking to labels and like sending out, you know, samples and demo tapes and stuff like that. I'm not really sure how he came across Drive-Thru. I'm guessing he must have had like a compilation CD or something with bands that were on Drive-Thru or had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Drive-Thru's name or something like that. And he's like, hey, you know what? Here's just another label. Let's send our stuff to. And we said, yeah, let's do it. Because at the time it was just let's send our stuff to as many labels as possible and see who responds.
Right. Wow. So yeah, back in the days of sending stuff out to labels, man. That,
Oh yeah, like I'll never forget. It was like we had an assembly line. Like it was like we put in some demo tapes and like fold up a typed up sheet of paper with like our picture and like our bio on it. We
mm-hmm.
like stamp the envelope, write the address on it, and then send it out in the mail. We had I don't know, we probably sent that to like 15, 16 labels I think, or just different people that we knew.
Wow. And so glad for that label picking you guys up and for existing, because for at least for kids like me, I think I'm pretty sure you're a few years older than me. I'm 32, but um you and I would see like pictures of you or the Starting Line or Homegrown, all of those bands that were part of the Drive-Thru Records kind of like sound or image. And
Hmm.
you guys were like the cool older brother that I never had.
It's kind of funny actually because that's sort of how we felt, I think, on the label. Not that we were cool anyways, because we're not. But I think we sort of felt like the old man, right? Like the old dad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the kind of jaded, kind of old man of the record label.
Uh-huh.
Because I mean, we signed pretty early with Drive-Thru, and we put out 2 records basically before Drive-Thru got really big.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of started signing a lot of these newer bands. And we were fortunate enough to tour with some of them and get to know them and become friends with them. But I think we always kind of felt there was a little bit of a disconnect. Like where we came from was just different enough from some of the newer bands
Mm-hmm.
to make it feel like we didn't quite fit in all the way. Like that's not to say it was awkward or bad or anything.
Sure.
It was just a little bit different.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me.
But I think that's also why we became really good friends with bands like Homegrown. Because Homegrown was a little bit older. They were kind of like us. They had kind of been there. They had kind of done that. And they had the same mindset as we did. We kind of thought about things the same, and we saw things in the same light. That we didn't necessarily have those same commonalities with some of the younger bands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine if you're maybe at a certain point you're a few years in and you've been to the studio a couple of times, done a few cycles of touring, there's maybe a more I guess maybe a more practical or evolving approach to the business side of music compared to maybe like the freshman bands that would just be like, oh, we get to put out a record and go and get in the van. This is amazing.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's true. But also for us, and even still, to this day, we don't really take ourselves very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't take anything that we've accomplished as a band for granted. It's like still we look back at all the stuff we've been fortunate enough to be able to do, and we think, fuck, man, this is like we are the luckiest sons of bitches in the entire world that we got an opportunity to do this. We still look at ourselves as the high school garage band, from 1994. That's how we still think of ourselves. We don't really view ourselves as this rock and roll punk rock show. So I think that was the kind of mindset that we always had touring. We were just like, hey, man, this is a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be doing this because we could be working real jobs in corporate America, and we're not. So, let's just be thankful that this is what we get to do.
That's such a beautiful way of looking at things, and I really relate to that because I'm a comedian in New York, which is can be kind of which is very competitive and can be kind of.
I can imagine that's a tough market.
It can be, and it can be kind of cutthroat and a little disillusioning. Even what the analogous scene to my world would be, so you have these big comedy clubs where you have to impress one person and they have to find you funny before you can work for them. So the comparison to that for me at least would be, I know tons of people that put on shows everywhere, mostly bars or like coffee shops, basically wherever. And if one place kind of starts getting a little bit of juice, and I found this out recently, a couple of my friends produce very popular shows, and then I found myself in the position of not being marketable enough for their flyer, which I understand and still kind of stings. But even like the little bit of success I have, just the fact that I'm talking to you right now, I feel like I've made it. This is like
that's so cool, man. I mean, but yeah, that's but isn't that what life is really about? Is just being able to do the shit that you love to do. Even if you don't get a chance to do it full time, it's like for us, we're not a full-time band anymore. We all have real jobs. We all have families. We all have, most of us anyways, with the exception of Scotty, we all have kids. So like all of a sudden one day you wake up in the real world and you're like, oh shit, but it we really are thankful for the fact that we still get a chance to do this. We don't love the fact that it's not full-time anymore because we would much rather be doing this, but, we understand where our limitations are and we understand what we have to work with. And, we try to make the most of it whenever we can.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I was going to tell you this at the end, but I think it makes kind of sense for what we're talking about now. I am not particularly interested in when Fall Out Boy's new record is going to be coming out, or what the new single is, because for my taste anyway, they kind of started to lose me when they started sampling TV shows I watched on Nick at Night. But
does Fall Out Boy even have a new record coming out? I wasn't even aware.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know. But what I do know is when I found out that you guys had a new record coming out, I was beyond excited. I was like pre-ordering that right away.
That's awesome, man.
So I want to talk a little bit about we were kind of talking about a little about this. I kind of have a couple of like guitar nerd questions, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So you're saying like early on, Face to Face is one of your favorite bands. I'm kind of curious when you like approach a song, because and I'll tell you this also. I kind of learned how to. Even though I'm not really I'm not playing in bands anymore, but I still play guitar and write original stuff and record it in GarageBand, if only just for myself. But I kind of learned song structure by like listening to songs like Scratch or Somewhere on Fullerton, those patterns. So, including Face to Face, what are some of your guitar influences in punk rock specifically?
Well, I mean, I would have to say Dookie was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. I saw, that it's celebrating 25 years or something since Dookie came out.
Yes,
and I think that's just ridiculous. Like to think back.
I know that's so crazy. MXR has just put out a guitar pedal that'll let you replicate the sounds of Billy Joe.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that, and it's funny because Kyle, our Allister's other guitar player, him and I were kind of talking about that, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to get that because it would be so cool, but the pedal is built to essentially mimic a JCM 900, and that's what I play out of.
Right.
So I don't know how well it would suit me to actually get one of those pedals because it would just basically give me the tone that I have now, which I already really like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's really no point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So Dookie was a huge influence on me. It more so probably than any other band that I could think of. But at the time, like I was really big into pop, like what I consider pop punk bands, like the Ramones, Screeching Weasel is one of my favorites. The Queers. The Mr. T Experience, those types of bands. That's how I learned to play guitar, and that's kind of the way that I structure my guitar playing is just from listening to so many of their records.
Oh yeah, those are great records. And talking about tone, and this is something I learned from listening to a lot of pop punk, is I don't like a ton of bass on the guitar because I like the bass to be the bass in a song.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, but like your records and Dookie specifically, where like you can hear the bass kind of cut through, because all of my guitar player friends in high school were like scooping their mids and listening to Injustice for All.
Right.
I feel
totally playing it, right?
Yeah, so that you can't hear the bass at all. That I love talking about this stuff. I do not know how many other people can relate to this, but I love this kind of chat.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, in all honesty, I'm not much of a gearhead. I have specific tones that I like, but and there's certain amps that I like to play out of, and there's certain guitars that I'm fond of.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't spend too much time thinking about it or too much time trying to dial in certain sounds.
Sure. One question I also have: do you play, and I apologize for not knowing this. Do you play leads in Allister, or is that Kyle?
We kind of do both. It kind of depends on the song.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, most of the songs that I write, I probably play rhythms on, only because if there's anything going on over the vocals, it's usually a little bit more difficult to play while you sing.
Right.
But on all of the songs that Scotty sings, I generally do more of the lead guitar work. It's truthfully, it's about 50-50. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. It's just, hey, can you play that part? Yeah, okay, I'll play this part. Okay, fine, sounds good. That's kind of how we do things.
Cool. And when you're coming up with a lead, do you kind of like start with the chords that the song is in, and then kind of noodle around from there?
Yeah, generally. It's weird. Songwriting is just such a fucking weird thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's so difficult to explain because really it's just, I very, very rarely do I ever sit down at a guitar and try to write a song. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Oh, yeah.
very rare that I'll sit down and I'll start playing chords and I'll be like, okay, I like the way that sounds. Now, where should I go from here? Okay, I could do that. Okay, now where should I go from here? Okay, no, that doesn't sound good. Maybe I should do this. That's not really how I write songs. Like, when I write songs, I'll sit down on a guitar and I'll just start playing, and usually 3/4 of a song just comes out.
Yeah.
And I just kind of hit record on my phone, so I have a demo of it, and then I go back and listen to it and think, okay, these are the parts I really like. Let me tweak this, and now we have a full song. Or, you have an idea, like all of a sudden, a melody just kind of starts running through your head,
Mm-hmm.
and you hear it, and you pick up a guitar, and you figure out the chords that go underneath it, and then you have a song. So it's weird. Like, I don't necessarily put a lot of effort into writing songs, which sounds strange, but, truthfully, there's not a lot of effort behind writing songs. It generally just kind of comes out.
Yeah, I kind of understand that as well. Like every time you like try to sit down with the intention of doing something, it never comes easily, and it can be so aggravating. And then
Yeah.
if you're just kind of like, watching TV and noodling around, that's when like the most magical thing will strike you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, of course, you always have those anomalies where, sometimes you actually do sit down to try to write a song and you come up with something pretty cool, and that absolutely does happen. But it's not the norm.
This is so this relates so much to me. Like when I'm trying to write a joke, every time I sit down with my notebook, like, okay, I'm gonna write some jokes and I'm gonna think of some punchlines. Half the time, it's like trying to nail Jello to a wall.
Right. See,
Uh,
that's actually something that I'm really curious about, because I mean, I would say that I have a sense of humor, but I wouldn't consider myself to be like a funny, like a witty person all the time.
mm-hmm.
So, like, when you write jokes, how does it start off for you? Like, do you think of like a situation or a scenario and then think of other things associated with that and try to come up with a punchline?
That's not too far off. Sometimes a kind of a way that a pretty safe like place to start, like how there's certain, like almost like a circle of fifths is a pretty safe way to start, like, oh, G, C, and D always sound kind of good
Right.
together. Um, and especially if you watch like late night talk show monologues, the setup is a lot of times like a statement or a fact, and then the
Right.
punchline is you're kind of going for like an unexpected twist that people aren't expecting on that setup. That's
Okay.
that's kind of how that's kind of, at least when I'm trying to like write topical jokes or come up with something like quick on Twitter, which again sometimes those are just lightning bolts of like, what? How did I think of that?
Right.
And sometimes the more like when you sit down and are like trying to like work out like a half-hour set, or you're doing like 40 minutes. Like I did 40 minutes on Monday, and I'm doing it again on Friday.
Nice.
Um, those are kind of you those are kind of, and I'm doing like my longer form stuff where there's
Right.
jokes in a story. So that's
Right.
kind of sitting down and almost like writing a short story. You have a beginning, a middle, and then you're making sure that there's funny to keep people's attention.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not it is not too different. And then like I would compare, like if I was going to compare like comedians I like to bands I would say like a one-liner comedian like Dimitri Martin or Stephen Wright. Those are like the like fast like minute 90 like Minor Threat kind of songs.
Right.
And and then like uh and then like a storyteller or somebody like Bill Burr, uh or a storyteller like Mike Birbiglia, somebody I really like. That's like constructing a symphony almost.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I absolutely love stand-up comedy. Like it's one of my most favorite things to do and to go to. And I'm always amazed at how they can come up with this kind of stuff. Like I just watched Dimitri Martin. I think he has like a new Netflix special. I don't know if it's new or if it's old, but he's the guy that like sometimes he goes through like the flip book, right, with the drawings.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah. And truthfully, I'd never heard of him before, and it kind of popped up on Netflix, and like I fucking loved it. It was so funny. He was so good.
Hmm. Oh, he's the guy who showed me that stand-up comedy could be like short setup punchlines. I had only seen like storytellers before then.
Right.
I,
But
I
I think part of why I liked him so much is because the the jokes are so smart,
yeah.
right? None of them are cheap, you know, or if there were any cheap ones, they were very few and far between, you know. But and that's, I think, those are the comics that I really like, the ones that are really smart. Like one of my favorites is George Carlin because everything that he did was just so incredibly thought out and
Oh yeah.
smart, funny. You know, like I like that kind of shit.
Oh, I love that stuff too. I don't know if you know who John Mulaney is, but he's got I think 2 or 3 specials on Netflix. You'd
Yeah, I do.
you'd love him.
Yeah, I've seen two, and I think there was one that I really liked, and I thought the other was, it was okay. But again, I can't do that, so I have to give him credit for doing that kind of stuff, even if I didn't necessarily love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's something that has come when with getting into my 30s now, is that I don't criticize stuff like super harshly anymore. I just go, I didn't really enjoy that. Whereas in my
Yeah.
20s, I might have been like screaming "sell out" at a lot of people.
Right. Well, see, that's the problem. That's the problem with Twitter, is that everybody has an opinion and thinks that everybody else wants to hear it.
Exactly. So one thing I'm curious about. We were talking a little bit about just again that feeling that you get to do this and you get to tour. I'm a little curious about when Allister. I don't know if you call it breakup or indefinite hiatus, but that era right before, it was probably because when I saw you before the Blackout had come out, and then I think I saw on your MySpace that this was going to be your last tour. Can you kind of take me through that time?
Yeah, so that was '07, I think, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only reason that happened is because I had a kid,
Right.
and you know, I wanted to be able to spend a little bit more time at home, raising my son and being there with him. And so, you know, I kind of made the decision to stop the band stuff for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of, you know, stay at home. Found a quote unquote a real job.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I still work for the same company I started with
Oh
12 years
wow.
ago or whatever it's been now. But yeah, I mean, that's really kind of what happened. And then, you know, as as that whole situation got a little bit more comfortable, then it allowed me to fit the band back in bits and pieces, right? Because
Gotcha.
you know when you have a pretty big life change like that, you're not really sure exactly how things are going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I kind of made the decision that I wanted to be home for my son, and then once I had a handle on that, or at least once I thought I had a handle on that,
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, okay, you know what? Now I really think I can get this band thing back working. And it's actually worked out really well. We put out a record in 2010. We put a record out in 2012. We haven't really done much since then, but now we're lucky enough to have put out the newest record now. So, and we've done a couple of tours in that span of time too. We did a couple tours with MXPX. We did a couple of shows just on our own. We did 2 tours, I think, in Japan, or 3 tours in Japan, one in China, another one in the UK. It's not, we can't tour for long periods of time anymore. We usually only go for, 10 days, 2 weeks,
Right.
here and there, whenever all of our schedules can kind of fit it. But, it works out, and it's nice because it still allows us to do what we love to do, just in smaller chunks.
And for me now, that's really comforting to hear, believe it or not. I just got engaged a couple of months ago,
Oh,
and
nice. Congratulations.
thank you so much. And it's definitely something that I think about a lot, is this anticipating balancing professional, creative, and family life. So hearing you say that you've done it and it's possible, and seeing that the band still tours and does records, that's because when I was like 20, I thought that when you had a kid, your life was over, essentially. And I'm glad
Yeah,
that
that
I'm
that
wrong.
was kind of what I thought too.
Well, I'm glad we were both wrong then.
No, totally.
Um,
Yeah, but that's what's so nice, Is like I had no idea what to expect, when my son was born. But looking back on it now, everything worked out really, really, really well. Would I like to be able to do music full time again? Yeah, absolutely. But also, in the same breath, I don't really want to be away from my kids for that long.
mhm.
Like, and that's what's so perfect about it. We can tour for 2 weeks. We can travel around. We can still do what we need to do, but then we can come home for a couple of months and be here, with our kids and with our families, and then we can go back and tour again for another 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever it is. So we don't have to miss out on a whole lot of things, but we still get to do what we love to do, like I said. So it really has worked out really well.
That's great, man. And talking about touring, you mentioned it briefly. This is something I'm very interested to talk to you about. You guys are really popular in Japan. I have this idea.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's fucking wild.
That to me is so cool, because as a kid who grew up on Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon, and was really into sushi when he got into college, and I've been to Tokyo twice now. It's just one of my favorite places to be. How does how did how did you get this like really loyal following in Japan?
We've been trying to figure that out for about the last 15 years. Honestly, like I don't really know. We were fortunate enough to go over there in 2002. And the first time we went over there actually was with Homegrown.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a label over in Japan at the time called Sky Records. And they had kind of licensed all the Drive-Thru stuff, and so they brought over us and Homegrown. I think we're the first 2 bands that got a chance to go over there from Drive-Thru.
Oh wow.
And the shows were really good. Like, we probably played venues that held 200, 250, and most of them were pretty full. I'd say there was, 150, probably 200 kids at every show, and we'd never been there before. They had licensed our records, and they sold them, so they helped, kind of promote, so people had kind of heard of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on that tour, we, as a band, we kind of realized that we all really liked it over there. And so we tried to make it a point to go over there with some regularity.
Right.
And so we did, and we were able to do that. And I think that kind of helped. I think that allowed people not to forget about us. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to get over there. And a lot of bands, really only get to go over there once, maybe twice, but it's like every 2 or 3 years. And so,
Mm-hmm.
You run the risk of fans kind of forgetting about you and then moving on to the next thing. But we were able to kind of go over there enough to continue to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got an offer from, I'm drawing a blank now. I can't remember the name of the record label, but we got offered to do like a covers EP. And we were like, okay, sure. And this was in 2006, and it was on a Japanese label. And we were okay, like, yeah, okay, sure, this will be fine. And so our bass player Scotty, for the last couple of years prior to that, had been like studying Japanese. Like, he loves everything about Japanese culture, Japanese food, Japanese people. Like, he's totally immersed himself in the Japanese world.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, well, it might be kind of cool to do like 3 covers of like some American songs and then 3 covers of some Japanese songs. And we were like, yeah, that might be an interesting idea, but we don't know any Japanese songs. And he's like, well, I do. He's like, there's a couple that are like really famous Japanese songs that I think we could turn into like some cool punk rock songs. And we were like, okay. Truthfully, we didn't even really think too much about it. We were just like, okay, yeah, let's do it. It seems like it might be kind of fun.
Uh-huh.
And so we did, and so that is what became the Guilty Pleasures EP. And to this day, I don't know how it happened, but when that got released in Japan, it took off, and it sold over 100,000 copies. Ended up being a gold record.
Whoa.
And it was just so bizarre. Like, I remember like sitting in the house of the guy that was recording it for us. We just recorded like in his living room. And we were like, okay, yeah, this is fun. It's just like another something to do, another recording that we can do.
Yeah.
And it ended up being like this huge thing over in Japan. And so on top of that, then when that came out, we were lucky enough, we had met this Japanese band called Ellegarden at South by Southwest, like the summer before this EP came out.
Mm-hmm.
And, we kind of hung out with them during the day and like got to know them a little bit. And they were super cool, super nice guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, well, why don't you guys, like, you have this new EP coming out. Why don't you come and do a tour with us over in Japan? And we're like, yeah, we'd love to do that. That would be really cool. And so little did we know that they would end up being like the biggest band in Japan at the time.
Wow.
And so this tour that we did with them was almost 3 months. And so we were over there for almost 3 months, and we played literally in just about every city that you could possibly imagine in
Mm-hmm.
Japan. Big cities, major cities, small cities. We played everywhere. And we played all types of venues. We played small venues. We played medium-sized venues. We played huge venues. And it was really cool because this band, Ellegarden, was so big that they probably could have done all shows in like 5,000 capacity venues. And every one of them would have sold out. But they were kind of like us in a way that they liked that intimacy about small crowds, and they liked that feeling of, community that punk rock kind of brings. And so we did a lot of venues that were like 400 or 500 capacity, and all of them were sold out, and that helped us out a lot too. I think that kind of helped solidify some of our fan base. So I do have to give those guys a shout out and say thanks, because that really helped us out.
That's awesome. That must have been such an incredible experience. I'm gonna have to listen to more of them. Do you listen to a lot of Japanese rock bands right now? Because I could give you some.
Not really. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't listen to a whole lot of new music these days. I still
Sure.
kind of listen to a lot of the old stuff. But I will recommend Ellegarden has a record called 11 Firecrackers, and that was a record they put out when we did that tour, and it's fucking ridiculous. Like every song is just it's so good, and it's kind of a shame because they're one of those bands where as good as the record is, it doesn't quite do them justice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like the band that you have to see live. They're just so good live. You know, they were one of the tightest bands I've ever seen. And they sounded perfect every single night. Like every night. Like they don't fuck up. You know, like we just get drunk and we screw up our songs all the time, but they don't make any mistakes. Like it's ridiculous. Like I don't know how they do it. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, 11 Firecrackers. I'm definitely gonna get that,
Yeah.
and I'll message you. I'll let you know what I think. I imagine it's awesome. If you were
Yeah,
if you were
it's real good.
if you were curious, I'll give you three bands that I think you might be into. There's a band that I just discovered called the Winking Owl.
Okay.
I would kind of describe them as like Tonight Alive meets early Paramore.
Okay.
I love them. A great pop punk band, or two great pop punk bands. One is called Septiluck,
Okay.
and they're really good. I think they're like the if I was going to describe to aliens what pop punk was, and I didn't have Last Stop Suburbia or Enema of the State, I would give them a Septiluck record. And skate. And there's this really great skate punk band called Secret Seven Line. I spent like easily $60
Nice.
at
Yeah,
Tower Records.
Secret Seven Line. I know I'm pretty sure we played a show with them once or twice. I don't know them personally. It was like they were like one-off shows, but I'm almost 100% positive we played with them before.
Oh, that would have been a great show because they don't ever like take a lot of time to slow down, and you guys don't ever take too much time to slow down
Yeah,
either. So
yeah. Well, maybe now that we're older, we might have
that that's funny. Um, so can you? I have a couple of other questions, and I'll let you get back to your life.
to. No, totally.
Do you have any? Do you have any like specific memories from your time in Japan? Because I've done comedy over there also, and I just love every second that I'm there.
Yeah, I
Anything
do
stick
too.
out?
Yeah, I mean, man, there's so many that I could think of. One of the things that I really one of the things that we got to do that was really cool is on that tour with Ellegarden. We got to see a sumo wrestling match, which was fucking way rad, like
Mm-hmm.
one of the coolest things ever. We also did. There's this town in like northern Japan called Aomori, and there's like this tradition over there. It's called wanko soba,
Mm-hmm.
and it's essentially I don't know if it's this one specific restaurant that we went to, or if there's numerous restaurants that do this, but it's almost like an eating contest, right? So we went into this restaurant, and these waitresses serve you bowls of noodles, and they're
Mm-hmm.
small bowls, and so there's like maybe 5 bites full of noodles, like in these bowls. And the goal is to try to eat as many bowls of noodles as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing that makes it kind of funny is that these waitresses don't let you stop eating, right? Because it's considered very rude if you don't finish the noodles that are in your bowl,
Right.
right? And so these waitresses come around, and it's like, no joke, as soon as you finish the noodles in your bowl, they're putting more noodles in your bowl.
Uh-huh.
And this goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And so you end up eating like 65 little bowls of noodles, and you get to the point where you feel like you're about to throw up, and you
Right.
seriously cannot eat anymore. And so you try to like slurp out the last of the noodles, and then they toss more noodles in your bowl. And you don't want to be a dick because
Right.
you have to eat the noodles that are in the bowl. And so it's this pretty fun game of how can you finish the noodles and put your bowl away before they dump more noodles in.
Oh,
And
that's
so it was an absolute riot. Like it was like one of the funnest days that I had there. I mean, it was all of Allister, all of Ellegarden, basically everyone on that tour. There's probably like 25 guys and girls all in this restaurant participating in this like tradition called Wonko Soba. Like it was absolutely hilarious. But I think my probably my biggest memory, and it's more of a sentimental one, is that we were there for almost 3 months, and we toured with this band, Ellegarden, and it was really the first time in my life that I realized how easy it is to make a connection with people all the way across the world who are a little bit different than you, but are also exactly like you.
Yeah.
That band is exactly like us, like in almost every way, shape, or form. We didn't necessarily play the same style of music, but everything that we believed in, everything that we thought about was exactly the same. And so in those 3 months, we really formed a bond with those guys. So much so, not just with the band, but with everybody in their crew. The sound guys, the guitar techs. We got so close to them. Like you said, you've been to Tokyo a couple times. You remember how in the Narita airport, when you're leaving, there's those escalators that go down, and there's the big wall of windows where everybody kind of stands to wave goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the day that we left on that tour, right, we're going down the elevators, and the entire crew from that tour is standing against the windows, waving goodbye to us, and all of us were crying, like just tears. Like it was so ridiculous. There was like 20 grown men just crying in this airport because we had, built such a friendship with those guys in those 3 months that it was really, truly sad to have to leave. Like I wanted to stay there as long as I possibly could. And I'm really excited that now we get a chance to go back. I'm sure we're going to see those guys when we're there. I'm sure they'll come and hang out. So it's going to be really cool.
I hope they do. That's a beautiful story. When I think of just like the communal power of music, and again, its ability to just bring people together from completely different parts of the world, it's one of those things that, and like when people talk about travel or about punk, I think specifically, is again celebrate. It's a bringing together, almost like a church going kind of experience. I've heard some people compare it to, specifically the comedian Pete Holmes. He brings that analogy up a lot. That's a beautiful story. That's a beautiful story, man. And I'm glad that you're going to get to see your friends again.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be cool.
One other thing I want to ask you about the new record, and then I want to make sure everyone knows when the Japan tour is happening.
Yeah.
I want to tell you the story. When the new record came out, I was super excited to listen to it. I think the new, adding Scotty a part and the slower part on Somewhere on Fullerton is a really great touch to the original song. I loved that. And I had this kind of interesting reaction when I listened to the new version of Moper, because I was excited to listen to that song, because I was like, because I think I read that your budget for your first record was $700, so I was like, I bet it's going to sound different than that.
A little bit.
But when I was listening to that song in college, I related to it in a very specific way, and I was working. I think I might have actually been working at the same Kmart where I got your record originally.
Nice.
And it's that sort of like prototypical small town, get out of the small town with my friends pop punk kind of trope. But when I was listening to it now, it took me back to all of these dead end crappy survival jobs I had for the first 9 years that I lived in New York City. I'm coming up on 9 years, so maybe like 7. And it was strangely poignant for me. And I'm curious if revisiting your older material, if you had any similar, if you reacted to your old material differently in a way.
I would say Not necessarily with that particular song, but I think there were some others that maybe, yes. You know, probably, at least for me, the song Blackout.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we recorded that song originally, we really liked it. I thought it was kind of an interesting song. It was always something a little bit different than what we had kind of been doing at the time. And it's a bit of a more personal song. I tend to not write personal songs as much, but that one I think kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always kind of liked the song for that particular reason. But it was really interesting to be able to take that song and change it even more and just do something completely off the wall. You know, I think the version that's on the new record now is really something that, as a band, we've never even attempted. You know, it has a little bit more of a electronica feel to it.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, you know, and it was fun. Not that, you know, recording any other songs wasn't fun, because it was. But that one, I think specifically, you know, it was kind of like that one really, we had a blank canvas and we can kind of do whatever we wanted with. And it was fun to be able to do that.
Yeah, the new version of Blackout is really great. And
cool, thank you.
yeah, basically, I think the new record is incredible. I love the new songs. Preparatory Challenge took me back to when I was a file clerk at a law firm. But also like a really potently lyrical song as well. So I really enjoyed it. Not only hearing the new stuff of where I think you guys are going to go if you do more new material, and I hope you do on your time, but also like seeing where you guys have been. It was really great listening experience for me.
Cool. I'm glad. Yeah. I think I think that's the plan. I think we want to be able to put out another record of brand new material, and we're leaning that way. We have probably, I don't know, half to 3/4 of a new record written right now. It's just a matter of, can we find the time to do it? Do we want to do it? Is there a market for it? Should we do it? When can we get together? So we'll have to see. We're trying to trying our hardest to figure out a tour for the summer. We know we definitely want to do something. We just have to figure out some dates and when and where. And so we're trying to work through that right now. So hopefully we'll have some news on that end, probably within like the next month or two.
Excellent. And you guys are touring Japan in March?
Yeah, it's March. I want to say it's the 10th through the 18th.
Awesome. Well, when I put this out, I'll put this out in a couple weeks. I'll let you know. I'll boost it online in Japan. I'll see if I can maybe get my listener base up in Japan some, because
awesome. Yeah. Let me know. I'll get the word out.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And if you guys play New York City, New Jersey, I'll be again in the crowd, a foot taller than everyone else, singing every word.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking to me, Tim.
Absolutely, man.
That was a dream come true for me. Tim is one of my favorite creative people, and I love his band, and I'm excited that they are going to continue to tour and put out new stuff. And the new record's great. If you want to check it out, Best of 20 Years and Counting by Allister is on iTunes, and they will be touring Japan in March. So go to Facebook and check dates. If you enjoyed the show, again, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Comic Will Carey, and you can also follow the show on Twitter at AwesomeDPod. And if you guys like the show, please feel free to leave a rating on iTunes or add us to your favorites playlist on Stitcher. I would be very grateful because this is something I love doing, and your support means a lot to me. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.